What's up, guys? DS3TV here. I don't wait. You wanna just yeah. Okay, so you should be able to see me now, but yeah. DS3TV here, and we are here for another video. This one is Trope from Sarcastic Productions. This one's fridging. Um, frid, fridging. Yeah. So this is gonna be a really good video, but yeah. Well, I'll say it before I get into the video. Now we're on the road to 10,000 subscribers since we're at 1,000. So, yeah. I think at 10,000 that's when I'll start doing like merch and stuff like that. Cause you do want to get like a following, I would say, to get to start doing that and feel confident enough to where you can sell that. But yeah, also want to say the reason I've been making videos, if you didn't watch the last videos, because I don't have my PC right now. I have to ship it. I had to ship it off because yeah, it crapped on me a month after buying it, so that's nice. So yeah, I gotta send it back to them and see what's going on with that. And yeah, so that's about it. Before we get into the video, let's let's just get into it. And remember to like the video. Also, I might not be on Twitch that much because it's kind of spotty because I don't have I have my PS4 here, but I don't have my PC that I got to stream and stuff like that. So it's gonna be a little bit spotty, but what can you do? So yeah, keep the it's in the link in the description right there in the link in the description under the video if you do want to see me stream. And yeah, so let's get into it and play.
Landville, 100% guaranteed to not do terrible things to supporting characters. I've talked about this before in its own trope talk, but character deaths are a big deal. They're momentous occasions both in story and out, because not only is the character dead, which is obviously a bummer on its own, but it also means the total loss of all future potential for a given.
But it also means depending on how the character died, they might not have really died. You could even say the Romeo and Juliet story, she drank a fake potion. You can still get away with that because she didn't technically die. She was in a half state where she was basically in a coma. So but yeah. And then I would say then you have but certain things in movies can in movies and stories and stuff can be certain, because actually we talked about we talked about a lot of tropes and because I'm a film major, that it makes sense why I'm able to talk about this a lot. But yeah, if you look at, I don't know, people falling from cliffs, those are certain things that basically you don't see a character come back from most of the time. In The Lion King, you had Mufasa fall into the pit and get ran over. That he was dead. It's no way he's coming back, right? So certain things, yeah, you know that character isn't coming back from, but it depends on how they died too. So yeah.
Character. All their arcs, dynamics, relationships, everything, all lost in exchange for a one-shot gut punch. Now, most authors recognize that this is a hefty loss for their story, so they make damn sure the impact is worth the price. True, non-fake-out main character deaths are often heroic sacrifices, protracted tragedies, or carefully woven resolutions to their arcs after all the loose ends have been tied up. They're usually given time and narrative weight to reflect this cost. The surviving characters will process their grief, reflect on what the loss means to them, and are often fundamentally changed by the experience, maybe carrying on their legacy, setting off on a lengthy quest for vengeance, or viewing their layered and complex life as a personal inspiration to guide their way forward. This is not that trope. Fridging is the cute shortened form of the full name of this trope, stuffed in the fridge, named for a now infamous issue of a Green Lantern comic where Green Lantern Kyle Rayner's girlfriend is murdered by the villain Major Force and stuffed in the fridge for him to find when he gets home. Fridging is the very specific subset of character deaths wherein a character is unceremoniously and brutally killed specifically and solely for the narrative purpose of hurting another, more important character. This motivation can be Watsonian or Doyleist, as in-universe villain motivation or out-of-universe authorial intent. In Watsonian cases, the killer is specifically motivated to kill the Friggy because it'll hurt the character who cares about them. In Doyleist cases, the killer might have all kinds of personal reasons to want to unceremoniously brutalize this character, but the author's motivation in killing the character is only to make the more important character upset. The only narrative role this death plays in story is hurting a different character, and it's still framed as unceremonious and brisk. Fridging almost always refers to character deaths, but sometimes the character is instead subjected to some kind of horrible torture or fate worse than death with the same overall impact. The character that really matters isn't the one targeted for the horror, but the hero who's reacting to it. And the Friggy's personal reaction to their awful situation is usually glossed over in favor of how much that focus character suffers by proxy. Because of reasons, fridging disproportionately affects female characters, often barely developed mons or love interests whose only salient character traits are the hero likes them. So when they're brutalized or murdered, often off-screen, they're more nuanced male hero.
Well, literally what I can think about thinking about this trope is probably Lois Lane when it comes to Superman. That's literally people mess with Lois Lane just because they know that Superman will come. So, yeah.
Fam/love interests can become deeply unhappy about it. In fact, that's a very easy litmus test to help determine if a character death constitutes fridging or not. If it could happen entirely off-screen and have just as much impact on the story, especially if it does happen off-screen, it's probably fridging. Its only narrative impact is how it bums out the more important characters, with no exploration of how it affects the character actually being brutalized or killed. Getting killed off-screen is such a dismissive fuck you to a character. There's no send-off, no admission of tragedy. The character becomes nothing more than a plot device for someone else's angst. Side character or not, nobody deserves that. Now, the off-screen test isn't quite enough to say if a death is fridging or not. See, while fridging is intended solely to upset another character, well-written character deaths almost always upset the other characters too. And since the character themselves is usually too dead to care, most of the lingering ramifications of their death only affect the other characters, typically by upsetting them. So the distinction between a fridging death and a non-fridging death isn't immediately obvious from just this definition. The key difference is a fridging usually makes the other characters upset briefly and shallowly, while a solid character death makes the other characters grieve. Frequently, fridged characters are never spoken of again after the arc they died in is resolved, or even before it's resolved. Try and convince me that Luke Skywalker was still bummed about Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru 10 minutes later. So as a second fridging litmus test, I'd like to propose a corollary of the iconic sexy lamp test, which explores if a story would meaningfully change if a character was replaced with a sexy lamp. This is the property damage test. If a dead character could be replaced by someone's prized Pokemon card collection and their loss would have the same or more emotional impact on the plot, that character was probably fridged. Now, this is kind of a rarity for this show, but fridging is a bad trope. It's not a frequently misused trope or a hard-to-handle trope. It's bad writing. Character deaths are not bad.
Because it's not like you didn't have to take any, it didn't take any creative like thought process to actually make that death. So yeah, you kind of just did it just to, basically just to move the story along, and it didn't have anything like holding weight basically.
Bad trope-wise, but fridging specifically indicates a lack of respect for the fridged character and their narrative potential. Fridging weighs a character's potential worth to the story and concludes that all their future potential and growth and dynamics in the narrative are worth less than another character feeling kinda bad for a little while. This is reflected both outside of the story and in the story, since this character's killer, be it the character who kills them or the author who makes the call, demonstrably couldn't give a shit about them in their own right, instead choosing to focus entirely on how ending this character's life will make another character upset for an arc or two. Their own life and death isn't as important or deserving of focus as hurting the hero by proxy. This successfully indicates that the killer is a terrible person, but it also reflects a level of dismissiveness from the author. A love interest/beloved character can be killed or deeply hurt in a way that predominantly affects the plot by hurting another character without it feeling like fridging. This is largely a matter of the execution, pun intended. If the death is unceremonious and quick and off-screen, that's a pretty bad sign, since it doesn't really give the character their due. It doesn't highlight the tragedy of their life and potential loss, it just focuses on why and how this will make the main character sad. Every character is the hero of their own story, and if they die just to further someone else's story, it denies that character the basic dignity of being their own person who exists as more than just a prop in someone else's life. It takes their death and the loss of their entire future life and minimizes it down into a short, brief emotional impact on another character. It's dismissive. Now, we're about to enter the spicy take zone because, you know, the MCU is my old favorite punching bag, but personally, this is how I felt about most of the major character permadeaths in Infinity War and Endgame, especially Gamora and Black Widow. Loki and Vision do die fairly quickly and unceremoniously, primarily to hurt the characters invested in them, but they're given narrative weight and some dignity in the process. It feels unfair and tragic in-universe.
Yeah, but like it still is given like some type of weight. But like Black Widows and like Gamora doesn't make that much sense. Like it doesn't. I'm not saying it doesn't make sense, but it's very like you just wanted them to die, and that's why like spoilers I guess for the actual Black Widow movie if you didn't watch it yet. Um, you know it doesn't. The movie doesn't. I mean, I guess it's not really spoilers because I'm not talking about the actual movie, but it just doesn't like nothing in the movie holds weight. And that's always been my concern with the movie because it doesn't hold any weight what happens in the movie because you know that she's already died, right? Like because you know if you're watching Black Widow, I'm assuming that you watched Endgame, so yeah, like it just has no, it has no like literally like no weight to it because you already know she's dead. Like it doesn't matter.
That they couldn't be saved rather than feeling like bad writing. But Gamora, well, it's actually kind of fascinating. In the two movies she'd been in, her entire arc had centered on escaping Thanos and his deeply fucked up abusive parenting situation.
I mean, now the thing is, I don't like Gamora. I didn't watch like Guardians of the Galaxy. I didn't care to. Um, that just wasn't something I like cared to watch because I didn't care enough about the characters. But like, yeah, like Black Widow, I was kind of mad about that because it's like, yeah, like you should have released this movie before Endgame because then it would have had weight. You know, like we didn't know that that Black Widow was gonna die, and plus like how like the timeline it was phrased in, it was phrased before she was gonna die. So like, it's kind of stupid to me that like this happened. You know what I mean?
Healing and growing as a person and learning to trust and even love her new friends. Her dynamic with Nebula was following that same track, realizing they weren't enemies but victims of the same terrible situation and the same manipulative, tortuous narcissist. Thanos' shadow looms large over Gamora's arc as the root cause of all the pain and suffering in her life and the thing that scares her most that she's constantly fighting to escape. In Infinity War, Thanos is told by Red Skull that in order to get the Soul Stone, he has to sacrifice something he loves. So he kills Gamora, like permanently. She's dead. Now that's bad enough. It's worse that it works. Gamora believes that Thanos is incapable of love, and quite frankly, by every indication, she's right. He's a raging narcissist who can't see past his own chins, and this should have been the test of character that screwed him over. And also, like, you must kill your loved ones to get this powerful MacGuffin and become strong is like baby's first obvious secret test of moral character, and it's frankly criminal that killing your loved ones was actually the only way to get them.
I mean, the thing is, I can't really get mad at it that much because they did pull. I mean, I know it's like, isn't that? I believe that's pulled from the actual comic book, Infinity War. I believe, right? I believe that's pulled from the actual comic. So I'm not that like irritated at it, at all, really. But yeah.
The stone. That's just lazy writing. Like, you had the grimdark option and you had the actually interesting option, and you picked grimdark because you thought grimdark was automatically more interesting. That's just...
Wait, in the book, he said kill this bad. Wait, as a secret test of character all the way back in the first Avenger, Cap passed because he was a good person. Well, no, the thing is, Cap... Okay. Well, no, the thing is, that wasn't the test. Cap believes that... Cap just believes that he doesn't like what he's in, you know, the super soldier thing that he was injected, that, you know, he was injected with and gave, or whatever, right? He was given that to say, like, yeah, like, basically, because they told, like, the doctors told him or whatever, like, whatever you have is going to be, and like, whatever you think is going to be amplified. Like, if you really think that you want to be like a very, like, I don't know, like, you know, like powerful person, like, you know, powerful, like, you know, I want to rule the world or whatever, you're gonna think that probably more and like actually do it. Or if you are like how Captain America is like a patriot, doesn't like bullies, just wants to be an all-around good person, you're gonna be a better good person. Like, it literally, that's literally what it's saying. Like, what it was saying in that movie. But yeah, I don't know. It's,
Just disappointing. Anyway, but it'd be bad enough if they just undercut Gamora's whole personal arc by saying that the irredeemably evil overarching supervillain who slaughtered her people and tortured her in Nebula for decades actually truly loved her all along. It crosses the line twice by having him prove that he loved her by murdering her. Gamora's entire arc and place in the narrative.
but that isn't even. I'm not even gonna say that was true though. He because he actually did prove that he loved. He said that he loved her and actually like did care for her when, because he never did anything bad to her. I don't believe, like because basically she, he did take her away from her home, but like he literally didn't like. Besides that, he did not do anything bad to her. Like he killed the whole population, which yeah, it is bad, but he did like raise her and stuff like that. Also, like basically, you know, he raised her and like actually kept her because she saw that she had a fighting spirit. So like he liked that. So I mean,
Narrative is undercut and sacrificed to give Thanos a character trait that makes no sense for him and to make Star-Lord sad so he acts dumb in the finale. Oh, and to make Thanos sad, which is given more focus and weight than Star-Lord being sad. Because obviously, making the pure evil villain kinda bummed out was worth the cost of one of Marvel's most interesting heroines. Like, I see what they were going for, but it didn't work well, it was a bad idea, and it completely undercut everything Gamora had in the previous movies, which is very disappointing. Meanwhile, Black Widow's death is similar to Gamora's, but is bad for different reasons, because unlike Gamora, who had too much character weight and potential to warrant her unceremonious death, Black Widow was completely underutilized by every other movie she's been in with the arguable exception of Winter Soldier. We had this franchise for a decade, and we never got an arc for Widow that was deeper than she's hot or she's boning the Hulk. This made her narratively disposable, but you can tell that the writers realized she was too disposable for it to be impactful, because for the first half of Endgame, they speedrun the whole characterization process by suddenly giving her some character focus, a dynamic with the other heroes, and an alleged personal arc about treasuring the Avengers as a found family all along. It was an attempt to make up for lost time so we'd be sold on her heroic.
but yeah, like honestly, that's why I feel like you should watch like how I was just talking about like how Black Widow didn't hold any weight because yeah, she didn't get any character arc at all, really. I would say if you're gonna watch the movies, I feel like you definitely have to watch, all of them going up into Infinity War, then watch, Black Widow, and before you actually get to watch Endgame, because Black Widow should have been released before Endgame. Like it would have held more weight. I think everybody knows that. Because then we would have learned, like everybody would have learned more about Black Widow and her past. And plus, at the end of the movie, it goes, this is a spoiler, it actually does like say like, yeah, like I'm gonna try to, patch things up with the Avengers. That's literally what it is.
Heroic sacrifice, but it was clearly token. The fact that the movie completely stopped acknowledging her death 5 minutes after they got back is really just kind of indicative of how little she actually mattered. Tony's heroic sacrifice got every hero in the MCU paying their respects, a protracted funeral scene, and an entire movie about how hard it is for the MCU to move on without him. Tasha got a bench in a lake and a solo movie a year and a half after she died. If we were supposed to believe she really mattered, the story should have acted like it. And it should have acted like it for longer than just like the hour-long wind-up to her dying to advance the plot. For stupid, contrived reasons. Was she just getting too expensive? Is that what the problem was? I mean, come on, guys. And it's kind of telling.
I highly doubt that she was getting too expensive when you were paying Robert Downey. Well, that is true. Probably was, because I just thought about it, Robert Downey Jr. was getting expensive for them too. Even though they had the money, Disney has the money to do it. Like, Disney has the money to pay them every single time. I don't believe that they don't have the money. But yeah, they probably were getting too expensive for Disney's liking. And that's why Scarlett Johansson had to like have a lawsuit with them, because they started just intentionally messing up things. Like not putting it out on Disney, not putting Black Widow out on Disney Plus at the same time in the movies, like how you have been doing with every other Disney property over the pandemic. They just didn't do it with Black Widow apparently, so yeah, they had to go to court for that. Well, go to court and settle that. So, yeah, that makes sense.
The MCU has rolled back or undercut all 4 of those deaths in one way or another. Loki and Gamora have time-displaced versions with 0 character development running around to replace their more interesting dead versions. Vision got an actual proper send-off in WandaVision, and Wanda got to actually grieve, plus he's got his own not quite the same copy running around now for future appearances. And of course, Black Widow is finally getting that solo movie we were promised, which is a damn hard sell at this point now that she's already dead and thus frankly irrelevant.
It really is, honestly, and it's a stupid thing. I don't understand why would you do that?
If the deaths had been properly impactful and narratively worth the cost, none of this rollback would have been necessary. Now, in fairness, the fact of the matter is that characters are not real people. Characters are parts of a story and they exist to further a narrative, and some of them really are just props in other characters' lives. And that's not a morally bad thing. But the story probably shouldn't make you think that. Sure, we, the audience, may be able to guess that the hero's small, peaceful town and stern but fair father figure just exists to get torched by the Dark Lord in episode 1 to set up the inciting incident and set them on the hero's journey, but the hero doesn't know that, and that's what's supposed to be important about this. To the hero, that's their whole world. Torching that town and icing that father figure off-screen just tells the audience that the hero might theoretically care, but we don't have to, and the story won't really convince you that the hero does care. It disconnects us from someone we're supposed to be relating to, and it undercuts the emotional impact of the death when the emotional impact of the death is the only thing this trope has. Now, if the father figure had been with us for, say, 2 seasons, or the first act or 2 of a movie, serving as a mentor figure for instance, we would expect him to die with some fanfare, and we'd be weirded out and upset if he didn't. A heroic sacrifice, a dying monologue, an admission that the hero made him a better man and so very proud, several references to him after he dies so we remember how he affected the hero's journey. If we didn't get that kind of thing, we'd feel cheated. But just because we, the audience, haven't seen the Chapter 1 dead dad for very long, the author feels comfortable just torching the place off-screen after a single expository line of dialogue and then expects us to feel for the hero when the story hasn't made this death feel meaningful. In this structure, the amount of weight a character death is given is not proportionate to how important the character is, it's proportional to how much screen time the character was given, which has nothing to do with how the characters should be reacting to this loss. Fridging is a very disliked trope for several reasons. For one thing, you'll be hard-pressed to find a heroic death trope that people like. Heroic sacrifices are basically the only one that's even halfway appreciated, since for the most part, killing a character is gonna feel bad. But more importantly, fridging lacks the counterbalancing qualities that can make a character death feel satisfying or earned. A hero might die gallantly defending their loved ones, which is heartwarmingly heroic with an element of free will and choice, or fully at peace with their fate, making their death a natural conclusion to their arc, or with some other caveat that makes the audience believe that their death works to end their personal arc. And if their death is tragic and unfair, it'll often be tortuously prolonged to really drive home to the audience that, yeah, sorry, it's not a fluke or a fake-out, the character isn't making it through this one. For a classic Fullmetal Alchemist example, spoiler alert, Maze Hughes, professional funny man and sweetheart, is unexpectedly killed fairly early in the series because he figured out the overarching plot way too early, so the villains needed him out of the way. His death serves as a major motivation for most of the heroes, most notably Roy Mustang, but it's not just a token heroic motivator to get the protagonists in gear. It feels awful. It's tragic, it's unfair, he fights very hard to stop it from happening, his wife and daughter are devastated, and the ramifications are felt all the way up to the finale. This death would not work the same if it happened off screen, and it could not be replaced by a binder of Pokemon cards. It means too much to the story, so it's not fridging. Fridged characters do not get this kind of treatment, and frankly, they're lucky if they get personal arcs at all. They die only to make another, more important character feel sad or mad. It's not a heroic sacrifice, they have no agency in it, they're not at peace with it, and their personal arcs, if they get them, aren't neatly resolved in time for it. Their death or brutalization is cruel and unfair because it's designed to feel cruel and unfair to the character they're supposed to hurt or motivate, but as a result, it undercuts the only semi-okay parts of character deaths and just makes the experience relentlessly unpleasant and catharsis-free for the audience. Now, this is not a mistake. This is an intentional part of the trope, because it essentially sets up an unstable narrative situation the protagonist must now work to stabilize and resolve, usually by hunting down and stopping the killer. This is a motivation that starts an arc, so it's not meant to feel like an arc resolution, which is often the only part of a character death the audience halfway appreciates. But it betrays a fundamental dismissal of the fridged character, which undercuts the very emotional impact they're trying to invoke. As an example, when Alan Moore wrote The Killing Joke, Barbara Gordon, aka Batgirl, is shot, paralyzed, and brutalized by the Joker, entirely to upset Jim Gordon and Batman and kick off one last terrible joke. She's not even killed, but how this traumatic event affects her is entirely glossed over in story. In fact, all she says to Batman afterwards from her hospital bed is how worried she is about what the Joker's gonna do to her dad. It's heroic of her to be concerned, but that's not why her reaction was written that way. Barbara didn't matter to this story. Alan Moore has actually said he kinda regrets treating her that way. He thinks his editor probably should have reined him in instead of responding with, and I am apparently quoting, "Yeah, okay, cripple the bitch." That fundamental dismissiveness on the part of the creator really does drive home that fridging is a fundamentally broken trope. If the author doesn't care about the character enough to give their pain narrative weight, they'll have a very hard time convincing the audience to care when they...
Yeah, because that's basically how it feels when that happens. Because you can tell the author didn't care about the character at all. Even if they were like characters about everybody else, the author didn't care because they if the devil happened off screen or something like that.
Suffer. The only way the author can make the audience care in this situation is by making this unimportant death hurt another, more important character. But since the author doesn't care about the fridged character, they'll have a hard time writing the more important character's reaction to their fridging. The more important character cares more about the fridged character than the author does, so how is the author supposed to write their grief when they clearly can't even imagine it? It comes across as shallow and hollow because on a very real level it is. A fridging isn't just lacking in resolution, it's usually lacking in real emotional weight. We're lucky if we really know the character who dies, and if we don't, then killing them only affects us by how it affects the characters who care about them, and only if we care about those characters in turn. Killing off a character we're not invested in tells us that character was never going to matter on their own merit, which can disengage the audience from the story as a whole. So opening a story by fridging someone sends a pretty clear message to the audience that most characters don't matter, which speedruns the disengaged audience problem right out of the gate. Fun fact, this is how Supernatural begins. I tried watching it way back when and lost interest after the first season or so, but I remember...
I never watched Supernatural, but I knew about it. I just never watched it. Tell me in the comment section if you think if it's good or not, though, because I've never watched it. I only seen the preview, the commercials or whatever when they say yeah, this new episode of Supernatural is coming on or whatever. That's the only time I've ever seen it.
Remember the pilot because it's burned into my brain. Even at the time, I could kind of tell the writing wasn't working. First scene, we meet our protagonists as young children in an idyllic home with their father and mother. Smash cut to the night, their father wakes up to see his wife stuck to the ceiling with a horrified expression. Then she explodes and the house burns down. Smash cut to the main plot, it's a couple decades later, brother 1 is in college and has a girlfriend, brother 2 shows up and tries to give him a call to adventure to make the actual plot happen. Brother 1 is reluctant because he's got so much going on for him in his personal life right now. Then brother 1's girlfriend gets stuck to the ceiling and explodes, so it's time for a road trip. The first time it happened, it was kind of spooky. The second time it happened, I actually laughed. I looked this up to make sure I was remembering the details right, and apparently in the plot, both of these women were killed specifically because the bad guy had plans for the protagonist, and in the case of the girlfriend, he's the one who introduced them in the first place, specifically so he could manipulate the protagonist by killing her. That's just, God, that's so funny. That's the pilot. No wonder death is meaningless in this show. So, fridging tries to have things both ways.
It is a show called Supernatural. I guess it's not supposed to be the best at handling death.
It gives us a character who clearly doesn't matter on their own, and then kills them in a way that highlights that they didn't matter to the story by their own merit, but then tries to tell us that their death really, really mattered to the character we're supposed to sympathize with. It's like the worst kind of damsel in distress, a character in trouble whose only trait we're given to care about is that they're in trouble. It's almost the epitome of tell don't show. If we don't care about the character and they die quickly and unceremoniously, we never have a reason to care. If we do care about the character and they die quickly and unceremoniously, and all we focus on is how bad that makes someone else feel, it feels like a bad use of their potential, and it makes us aware of the hand of the author, which is never a good thing. Now, some authors recognize this without really recognizing the problem, and will try to play it one of two ways. In one school of thought, the soon-to-be fridged character will suddenly be given an unprecedented amount of on-screen focus and a handful of purposefully heartwarming or cute character traits to quickly get the audience invested in this hitherto non-character so it feels halfway momentous when they die. I like to call this the Whedon school of fridging, or the Coulson effect. This is the author's attempt to speedrun the getting the audience invested process without having to actually make the character stand on their own, or, matter. And on the flip side, sometimes a fridged character will give some kind of token justification for why their death is okay actually, usually along the lines of, I'm at peace now, or I already have everything I wanted, or the real treasure was our friendship, or something. This is an attempt to kludge together a satisfying character resolution so it doesn't feel completely unceremonious, but it suffers from the fact that the fridged character definitely didn't have an arc leading up to it. It doesn't fully counterbalance the disengaging gut punch of an unceremonious character death because it feels token and disconnected. If the character's arc was really resolved, we probably shouldn't need to hear them say it out loud seconds before they die. It's like how we shouldn't need to hear the characters say I love you to know they're in love, you know? I love you shouldn't be a surprise to the audience, and neither should I'm totes cool with death now. Both just end up feeling like a way to compensate for inadequate writing last minute. You may recall, Black Widow's death in Endgame did both of these things, and it was bad because neither of these writing tricks make up for wasted character potential. Avoiding fridging is a matter of giving the character their narrative due. It's about treating them like they really are the hero of their own story, and writing their death or brutalization as if that's where the story actually ends. How much more impactful would a fridging be if the story actually acted like an important story was ending with their death? And how many riots would there be if an actually important main character was iced as unceremoniously as these fridging victims are? If Captain America had gone over that cliff with a token little half smile and an I'm at peace now, there would have been fucking riots in the streets, and you know.
Oh yeah, definitely that would have happened. I feel like it would have happened. It definitely a similar like death to Black Widow. If like Hawkeye did die, it probably wouldn't have made that many people mad, like comparatively, because I just feel like it probably would have been like the same reaction as like Black Widow dying. Now, but yeah, like she's definitely right. Like if you say like, you know, Captain America or Iron Man died that exact way, no, it would not have. But yeah, as I was saying, because the camera cut off, but as I was saying, like yeah, it probably would have not worked. Like, nah. Yeah, Iron Man or even Spider-Man. Like everybody remember when Spider-Man said like, "I don't feel so good, Mr. Stark." Like that held weight. I don't think that wouldn't have like been a like that wouldn't have worked if it wasn't like, you know, if it didn't hold it, if their deaths didn't hold weight, it wouldn't have worked like at all, you know.
But I guess this is just another trope that boils down to it's better to write actual characters with agency and personal goals instead of people-shaped plot devices. It's funny how often that happens. So, yeah, and thanks again to World Anvil for sponsoring this video. As you may know,
Oh, that was, I think that's the end of the video. I don't, yeah. Yeah, that's the end of the video. So, yeah. Talk to you guys in the next, yeah, so, yeah. So talk to you guys in the next video also. Subscribe to the channel. Want to get to 10K subscribers. Yeah. So if it's not out already, my Q&A video should be out pretty soon. And yeah, talk to you guys in the next video. And yeah, peace.